Together program manager, and I'm very excited to be here with you guys today. We'll share a bit more about what Farms Together is, and we'll also have a lot of time for questions towards the end. So of course, if anything comes up and you want to put something in the chat, feel free to put your questions in the chat. But otherwise, we'll have a good amount of time for Q&A at the end. So Farms Together is a, okay, there we go. Farms Together is, as I mentioned, kind of a tri-organization collaboration. It's a federally funded program through the Local Food Promotion Assistance Program. I'm sure some of you or many of you might be familiar with that program. It is a state, so California's version is quite large. We're redistributing about $70 million statewide that's going to priority farmers and different food recipients, again, across the state. And broadly, the goal of LFPA, or Farms Together, is to improve local food and agricultural supply chains while also building long-term resiliency within these supply chains. Farms Together is kind of the California's funneling of the Local Food Promotion Assistance Program. And as I mentioned, there's a tri-organization collaboration between us that comprises Farms Together. So myself and Andy on the call are from Fresh Approach. As you mentioned, there's other folks from Fresh Approach on the call as well. CAFF is also one of the organizations that represents Farms Together. Fresh Approach and CAFF play kind of similar roles within Farms Together. We're working more closely with the vendors and the farmers. And then there's also the California Association of Food Banks, which our team members Wilken and Joyce are here today. And they're focused a little bit more on invoicing and reporting. Yeah, and so I think also I'll just mention that Farms Together as a group is, a newish program. We're kind of still in the implementation stages, but we're also really learning as we go along. And I think as a group whose goal is to embolden the resiliency of local food chains and local food systems, that we're really centering adaptability at this program and wanting to strive to be adaptable and meet the needs of our vendors as well as farmers. And I say that now just kind of as part of our identity of Farms Together. We're working a lot with different collaboratives across the state. And so really trying to be adaptable and transparent with folks. And yeah, as I mentioned, our goals overall are really to broaden and deepen our impact with diversity, equity, and inclusion at the front. So as compared to other programs, rather than kind of a price point, rather than the price point being the competitive factor, we're really focusing on who's the priority farmers and supply chain diversity. We are evaluating folks, but also really centering, again, supply chain diversity and ensuring that our priority farmers who are socially disadvantaged, local farmers, oh no. Oh, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we can hear you, Samiha.
Can you hear us?
Okay, sorry. My internet froze for a sec. Am I back?
Yep.
Yeah, I can hear you.
We never lost your voice.
Oh, okay. I think it just froze on my end. I'm so sorry about that. Thank you. As I was mentioning, just our long-term impact and our long-term goal is to create resilient sales channels and food chains that are prioritizing socially disadvantaged farmers across the state. We're finding that it's a really kind of it's regional based. It's very individual and kind of different based on the needs of different farmers across the region. But overall, the goal of Farms Together is to truly concretize sales channels and support and build resiliency within the food system, supporting socially disadvantaged farmers, which includes BIPOC farmers, local farmers, and small scale farmers. So yeah, that's truly our goals, and we're building that into the mission in different ways. We're building that into the program in different ways. I think other values and missions that we're holding close to the program are also transparency and accountability. As I mentioned, this is kind of a program we're almost building the plane as we're flying it. And so we're trying to be really transparent with folks, with our vendors and applicants about the process, as well as about our capabilities, what we can and can't do, and just what we're finding throughout kind of the process of working with different vendors across the state. Again, I think because it's such a large scale program, it really differs by the region and vendors. And so we're trying to be as accountable and transparent as possible throughout this program. We also really want to honor privacy, specifically data privacy. I know that, farmers may be hesitant to share information with folks that they're not familiar with or that they've never heard of before. So we're just working to ensure that farmers feel like they know what's happening with their information and kind of where it's going. Yeah, and as I mentioned, this is a very kind of co-development and malleable program that we're working with vendors to create to best meet their needs. So we're hoping that this is really an adaptable program, very open to feedback and very receptive to changing the programs based on vendor needs and farmer needs, and really centering open and honest communication, as well as coalition building. I think that, again, because it's such a wide, program with a large reach, that we're really focusing on making sure that the communication is clear with folks and that we're open to different needs of vendors, as well as really building coalition and relationships throughout the state. And I don't know if Andy or Wilken, if you want to add anything.
Just that, this is a real new opportunity, and it's in California, but it's also around the country, to really think about how we can make small farms, small to mid-sized farms, and socially disadvantaged growers and producers have a permanent space in the hunger relief ecosystem. We see this as an amazing opportunity to invest in the middle of the supply chain. And part of our role as organizations is to work towards the permanent funding of this. And just so everyone knows, and it was mentioned, this is from USDA money, but it's from the stimulus care package. So it is not permanently in the Farm Bill. There is advocacy happening nationally right now in Farm Bill negotiations to make it permanent. A lot of our work right now as a team is to develop the strong and efficient systems for the equitable dispersion of the funding around the state, so that if there is a future where this funding becomes permanent, we can make this as widely available as possible to this target farm population.
Thank you. Also, I'll just say my internet seems to be a little bit spotty right now. So if I cut out, please let me know, or someone else can take over, but hopefully it'll be okay. Great. Yeah, so as we mentioned, we're working across the state with different food hubs and smaller farm collaboratives to procure and distribute locally sourced, nutritious, as well as culturally relevant foods to different food distributors throughout the states. We're really focusing on local producers as well as our socially disadvantaged and priority farmers. And in addition to kind of increasing local food consumption, we're also really hoping that the funds can help expand economic opportunities for our local and underserved producers, as we've mentioned. Specifically, we're working with socially disadvantaged producers and evaluating our different vendors kind of on their sales channels, on their supply chains, actually, and who they're supporting, making sure that that they're mission aligned and demonstrating a long-term commitment to supporting farmers that are aligned with our priority farmer demographics. So essentially the program is working with food hubs and smaller farm collaboratives throughout the state to kind of aggregate and source product with different farmers. Again, we're prioritizing socially disadvantaged farmers. And then we're working with each vendor to distribute that to different food banks and community food access sites. This can look like food banks, food pantries, schools as well, but primarily the bulk of this funding is going to food banks. Yeah, and we're hoping to source culturally relevant products also that are supportive for the food recipients as well. So also just to name that this is not like a comprehensive list of all of the folks that are being impacted by this. I think there's a lot of stories that are not necessarily being told or that aren't being captured in this image and that we're well aware of, but that this is hopefully a broadly kind of impactful program across the state. And as Andy mentioned, a federal program. And I will pass it to Evelyn to share more about the application process.
Thanks, Samiha. Yeah, so we wanted to share a little bit about our application process. So as Simi had talked about a little bit, Farms Together is a mission-driven program. So that is what we're focusing our applications on as well. So in order to apply, first, a vendor has to become an approved vendor by meeting our eligibility requirements, which I will talk about a little bit more in the second slide. And then the second step after becoming an approved vendor is that folks will meet with the Farms Together team to match them with the most appropriate contracts and local partners. So by that, we mean that folks are going to meet with our team, right, to talk more about the details. So what we hope that this process becomes, right, is once you've been become an approved vendor, then folks will have the chance to apply to different contracts. And it will be a reoccurring process like going forward. So then now, Samiha, you can go ahead and, did I miss anything, Samiha, that you want to add?
I don't think so, yeah.
Okay. And then you can go ahead and move to this second slide.
Oh, this is, or
Oh,
did
this
you?
is the second slide. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so then in order to become an approved vendor, our application is online on the Farms Together site at CAFF, which we will share with folks after this presentation if there are folks interested. But essentially you would apply online on our application. And there are different eligibility requirements that we have as a program. So the first one, like we mentioned, is meeting our supply chain needs. So since we are mission driven, right, we want folks to be able to source from our targeted demographic. So that means if if somebody's applying as a food hub or informal aggregator, they will need to be sourcing from underserved farmers so that we're able to support farmers who have not had experience, like the chance to be participating in these market channels. And then the second eligibility requirement that we're going to need folks to be able to fulfill is being able to fulfill orders. So that means like the size of the contracts that we are like giving out, and also locations that all of the details align with the distributors that they are choosing to work with. And lastly, which I will expand on a little bit more, is providing a food safety plan. So we do want to make this program as accessible for folks as we can. We know that oftentimes certifications are very expensive and they're a very lengthy process. So our happy medium that we found was asking folks to provide a food safety plan so that we make sure that folks are following good agricultural practices and that it's still easy for folks to apply to. So we don't actually require any food safety certifications, but we do ask for a food safety plan.
Yeah, and I think I'll just add that to the process of becoming an approved vendor, we're also finding that, you know, there may be a certain amount of technical assistance that different organizations need. We really want this to be a program that can improve the kind of long-term operations for vendors for, you know, whether it's a small farm or kind of an aggregating business. So just please reach out to us if you are interested in becoming an approved vendor and might need a little bit extra support or clarity on that.
Yeah, thank you, Samiha. So now onto the food safety plan. So folks that are applying for it will need to turn in, like I mentioned, a food safety plan and also define their status under the PC rule if they are applying to the program as a food hub or an informal aggregator. So I didn't mention this previously, but folks can choose to apply to the program as an informal aggregator or food hub, or a single farm vendor, which then their food safety requirements are different based on the type of operation that you're applying to the program as. So if you're applying under like an informal aggregator or a food hub, you are going to need to share your status under the PC rule, which again, I will explain a little bit more about that because there has been a lot of confusion as we have rolled out the program about the PC rule. So I did also want to emphasize that the food safety plans change from operation to operation. So that's why in this presentation, we're not sharing like a food safety plan because it's going to change between operations. But we do have a lot of resources that we provide in our application / we can provide to folks before applying because we really hope that folks are able to come into the program with the food safety plan already made. It really streamlines the process to pass the approved vendor part and move into the second step of our application process, which is where folks can apply for like bids to different contracts. So here I made a little list of the different templates that we have. So we have farm specific food plan templates and food hub specific food templates because they are different since we're assuming that food hubs and informal aggregators are packing products from different farms. And then we also do provide a PC status flow chart so that if you are not very familiar or aware with the PC rule, you're able to just walk through, look through that flow chart and figure out what your operations status is under the PC rule. Yeah, so now I wanted to expand a little bit more on the PC rule as that's something that we have gotten a lot of questions for folks who are applying as a informal aggregator or a food hub, right? So the PC rule, which is the long form is the preventative controls rule, is a rule that applies to facilities that manufacture, pack, and or hold human food, which food hubs are considered facilities that fall within those parameters, which is why we need food hubs and informal aggregators to share that status with us, right? So with the PC status too, there are also different exemptions depending on size and what your operation looks like. So I listed a couple of the exemptions that are available, which when folks are on that document, right, they are able to go through that flow chart and see what their exemptions are if they're exempt, which most of the time they are. So if you have not heard about the PC rule and are a bit confused about it, don't worry, like we have a lot of resources available and our food safety team is also able to help like guide you through that. But we do hope that folks have that prepared before applying, as that's one of the requirements to become an approved vendor.
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, I know we mentioned that there's different amounts of technical assistance that each group needs. So for the groups that might not be as established or have as thorough of a food safety plan, we're hoping that this will set you up for success with different vendor or with different sales channels post Farms Together. So we're really seeing this as like a step into not just sales for Farms Together, but kind of more institutional sales channels beyond this. So I know this might seem like a lot for folks that aren't familiar with a lot of this, but it is just to support your long-term kind of business growth.
Yeah, and then really quick to Samiha. Yeah, I wanted to share that the templates too make it a lot easier. We do take in consideration that it takes a lot of time, but a lot of folks are already doing these practices. Like you guys are already doing the work. So it's just putting it down on paper and having that document that shares what your procedures are already at your operation.
Thank you, Evelyn. Yes, so as we mentioned, the funding is really, while we're striving to have equal coverage across the state of California, again, because each region's needs differ and each region is really different, just in terms of farming resources, we're finding that may, we might not have equal coverage, but that we're certainly doing the best we can to reach all parts of the state and allocate funding appropriately. Funding has already been allocated based on population centers and food banks. So we're working to redistribute that funding and prioritize aggregators and farmers that are demonstrating kind of a commitment to socially disadvantaged farmers throughout the state, as well as locally sourced produce. And we have two different options for this program. If you do become a approved vendor and are interested in working on this further. So one of the options is a CSA style box. Many folks are already familiar with just what the CSA style box is, but we've figured the reimbursement rate to be $36 a box. So that's about $27.50 for product, and then $8.50 for overhead and staff costs, including cost of box and transportation. And these numbers are kind of just a goal. We're not expecting that, if you are doing this program, that everyone's hitting that exact number, but it's just an overall goal of what we hope to get for each box. And the other option is also a bulk project. So the vendor is kind of given just an overall contract number amount over the course of however many months it is decided upon. And then the food bank orders from that availability list, and each week you'll be able to see kind of your spend down. And I'll say again, we mentioned that this is a pretty malleable program. So these are the two options that we're working with, and we're finding that each vendor and operation has their own different style. And specifically for how many pounds of food in each box, we're aiming for, I think, 10 to 12 pounds per box. We know that can change and vary during the season. For example, during the winter season, we know it might be a little bit lighter of a box. So we're hoping to just have something be impactful. It doesn't necessarily have to be about the amount, but really high quality, nutritious and locally sourced food. But ideal weight is 12 to 15 pounds with, I think, like 7 to 10 different items is what we landed on. And I will pass to Evelyn to share a bit more about just what we've found through this program.
Yeah, thank you, Samiha. Yeah, we wanted to share a few outcomes that we hope for vendors who participate / have already found through some of our vendors who are active in the program. So one of those being that we hope to have folks continue the relationships that they're building during the contracts, during the project, like afterwards. So a lot of folks are partnered with food banks. So we are hopeful that those relationships will continue after the program ends. And then another outcome that we've seen is folks are expanding their skill sets and gaining a lot of experience through this program. So for a lot of folks that are part of this program, it's their first time having a larger size contract. So it's really helpful for them to have this experience to then go on afterwards and be able to apply to different programs and be able to fulfill like bigger orders. And then we also are hoping that this helps market y'all's business. There is a lot of press releases with like food hubs and with vendors that are participating. So we hope that this gives exposure to each person's business to be able to reach more people. And then the last thing is to be able to expand their business operations, since this is a constant, it's a consistent inflow of money. We're hoping that it helps folks expand their business and upskill or be able to really like grow their business.
Yeah. And again, just long-term outcome is hoping that beyond the Farms Together and LFPA funding, as Andy mentioned, right now it's not permanent. But the hope is that beyond this funding, that farmers and aggregators can kind of create their own relationships with different institutional purchasers, so that they'll have long-term consistent purchasing relationships, just to build out our local food systems as well. And so this program recently started in, December is when we really started to get funds out and started working more closely with the vendors to source product. And since then, as I mentioned, we found a lot of different learnings and kind of discovered a lot of different things with folks. I think the main things that we're finding is that it's become a very individualized approach, which allows for a lot deeper relationship building, because this is a statewide program and we're working, with different regional centers and different agencies across the state. We're deepening our relationships and kind of building coalitions throughout the state. We're really excited to build relationships and connect vendors to different organizations, as well as connecting vendors to other vendors within the state. I think folks are able to learn a lot from each other just based on the different needs, and also different models. So it's a very individualized approach, but there are, of course, so many overlapping details that we found that's really helpful. And then we're also really wanting to honor just adaptability and transparency, as I mentioned, through this project. Again, the needs differ based on each vendor and food recipient. And so we're wanting to make this adaptable to meet the needs, so that we can hit our priority demographics of socially disadvantaged farmers across the state. And feel free to jump in if anyone.
I do want to step in because there's been a few questions from food banks about this funding, and something to know is this program originates from the Department of Social Services, who issued the funding and allocated the funding to an already established list of food banks around the state, meaning those on the call today, we actually don't have decision making on where the food ends up. It was already allocated. Today's call is mostly focused on farmers and producers and aggregators who are interested in contracting in this program. So I've put in a contact of Wilken, who you met earlier, with the California Association of Food Banks. So if food banks are on the call and want to understand more how this program incorporates them, please reach out to Wilken. But we, do not have explicit say on where the food ends up that was already determined.
Thank you for clarifying that, Andy. Great. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but this program is funded through 2025 through mid-2025. So there's not, there's about a year and a couple of months left to really make this program what we want it to be. And I think some future opportunities that we're excited about are connecting vendors with each other, whether that's within the region, but doing more regional coalition building. This is a really great opportunity just to support vendors and do, skills share, have them learn from each other. And a lot of the challenges they're facing are very specific to their region or very nuanced. And I think in general, this program has a lot of open possibility for adapting it to promote different models, as well as different values. We're working possibly with one organization in SoCal that's supporting kind of offering a premium price rate for folks that are doing climate smart agriculture. So there's a lot of different opportunities for this. But yeah, I think the long-term goal is just making this kind of consistent funding beyond Farms Together and really securing this funding.
And it was over.
Does anyone else from Farms Together team want to share any future opportunities you see or anything I missed? Cool. Go ahead, Andy.
Just saw a question come from Vince in the chat. What are food banks saying about the likelihood that we'll continue to buy food from these vendors at the prices after the funding and coordination has gone? Have we heard any feedback? Vince, that's exactly our theory of change. We've seen that we've been testing programs like this for the last couple of years, and in certain cases, food banks have allocated their own budget to this. And as part of we've been piloting this program already, and we've seen that occur in one instance. a lot of that is our goal to set up really strong relationships between vendors and food banks, where those groups can get to know one another, build strong values and collaboration, and then the food banks hopefully can allocate, when possible, their own budget. So that's absolutely our theory of change, but is a case by case situation based on, you know, funding availability, grants that food banks have.
Yeah, Vince, concurrently, there is a feasibility study being done up here in the Bay Area with 5 regional food banks in the Bay Area, with the idea that if they could at least aggregate some common crops together, they could get the sharpest market price available that could help with some of the costs. We all recognize that market cost is a new thing for most food banks. But at the end of the day, they still want to do the right thing, reward farmers that have historically been underserved. And as the participants in food banks change culturally, to make sure that they align the supply with demand. But that study is concurrently happening as we speak, with the intention that we can continue the movement after the LFPA is exhausted.
Thank you both for sharing that. Yeah, and so specifically, we are doing some targeted regional outreach. We're finding that LA and so Southern California has a really broad reach. Their food banks are quite large, and we are working with multiple different vendors in the area, but we're recruiting for folks that are in Southern California. So if you are interested, or if you know anyone else that might be interested who you think could be a good fit for this program, please have them reach out to us or have them just check out our website. I think we're pretty well saturated in the kind of Central Coast where we are located, but we're also looking for folks in Northern California as well. Yeah, so please just keep that in mind. Southern California and kind of Northern California, like north of Humboldt area.
And to add on to that, meaning that really means we're going to be prioritizing onboarding those other regions more so than the Bay Area at this point, because there is an oversaturation, and that's just sort of not permanent.
And I just came to the class.
Not a permanent space, but we, as this program has been delayed for 2 years, we have regional priorities. So you can reach out to us if you are in a region that's less prioritized and see how that will affect you. And I would also just want to focus a lot of our recruitment efforts are going to be on aggregators. We really see this program as an opportunity to invest in the middle of the supply chain, and in doing so, spread the impact to the largest number of farmers as possible. That being said, individual farms are welcome to reach out and become approved vendors as well. What this will have a result in, though, is just varying size of contract sizes. And I think, as mentioned before, the funding is already allocated around the state, and it was allocated in a way that favors population centers. So there is more funding available in Southern California, but there is a regional spread across the 34 food banks that Wilken mentioned all around the state. So a lot of the specific contracting questions, and I know we'll get some of those probably about how big these contracts are, how long they are, those are quite individualized to the region. And it's also individualized to the number of vendors we have in those regions.
I also want to add that under the local food purchase assistance program, a local vendor has been defined as being within 400 miles radius from your distribution point. So hopefully that kind of broadens the search of resources that can accommodate everyone who's a distribution partner.
Yep. And a great sort of follow-up to that is a question from Jody about how much product and months of the year are enough to make it worthwhile for farms together. We're really working individually, based on region and based on the capacity. We understand that working with food systems is a case-by-case, story-by-story opportunity. And we have long-standing between CAFF, Fresh Approach, and CAFF-B, have a long history of working with farmers. So I encourage you to reach out to the email I'll put in the chat box to talk about how this program would work specifically for your organization.
And also just to Jody, your other question of if a vendor can begin working with Farms Together while building capacity, definitely. Again, as Andy mentioned, it's really depending on each operation, but the hope is that this program specifically will support folks so that beyond Farms Together, you can have you've built out your operations more steadily, and so you'll be more ready for institutional sales. So we are, providing and offering a certain amount of technical assistance, but we also expect that vendors come in with just having some basic understanding and like knowing what their capacity is, and being really aware of who they can support and what their capacity is. Yeah, okay. And Naomi, to your question, I think Andy mentioned that, so the funding is really allocated to different population centers. It's based on population needs, and it's already been pre-allocated to different food banks. SoCal has really large food banks. There's just has a really large population, and we do have a few groups that we're working with in Southern California. I think the main challenge is just finding groups to meet the need of all of the different food banks out there. So as I mentioned, we're prioritizing applicants that are coming from the region of LA, so just Riverside, SoCal, Imperial as well. And in addition to that, also Northern California. And I think that's pretty much it. So Andy has put in the chat our email that you can reach out to, but we have plenty of time for questions right now. Thank you all for coming to this presentation. I know there's a lot of different details and things that we've presented to you, so we're super open to questions if folks want to come off mute or just put them in the chat as well.
Just saw a question about minimum number of boxes for a contract. There is no minimum number at this point. We are accommodating a lot of different models here. Again, our priority is supporting small socially disadvantaged growers, so there is always going to be a focus on that. And the presentation is being recorded and will be shared out. I do want to say you might have noticed there's been a lot of we're really building the plane as we're flying it. It's quite a big program and it's one of a kind. So everything is being there is, moving targets and some changes, but we're trying to be transparent about that as we're learning in real time.
Yeah, and there's some more specific questions about if product needs to be sourced from California. Andy might be able to speak to that better, but I think as Wilken mentioned, we're supporting local food, which is defined as 400 miles. We're expecting the aggregator, the applying business, to be from California and to be based in California.
Short answer is yes, on California grown.
Yes.
Great question from Hester. Hester you are already approved, and we can follow up directly about your question. There are scenarios in which the vendor can work with their own distributor. These are case by case story. So again, when in doubt, because things are being very individualized by region and capacity and applicant, email us at info@farmstogether so we can talk to you individually about the opportunities in your region.
Great.
And I heard that from someone else, Kevin, so don't give me credit. It was probably the Wright brothers.
Definitely open to questions and feedback or thoughts that anyone has, whether it's now or later. We've shared our emails in the chat as well as on the slide and our website. And the website is pretty comprehensive about the requirements that we're expecting vendors to meet. So feel free to go through the website and look through our requirements, and then if you still have questions, feel free to email us. Again, as I mentioned multiple times, we're very open to feedback and really want to be receptive and make this program work for you all.
I have a quick question for you all. For those in the room, after this presentation, any vendors and farms based on this, is there any interest? You can just put this in the chat in applying. Just cool. Just great.
Awesome. I got some interest. Again, we're here to support with any technical assistance. So if you think you might be a good fit, but like need some support to meet the program requirements, reach out to us and we're happy to support you in that. Is there anything else that I missed from Farms Together team?
I do want to mention, I guess I do want to add that we do have Spanish speaking staff on the team. I'm not sure how many folks on the call are Spanish speaking, but si hablan español, también hablamos español. This is we're hoping again to make it as accessible and to all folks. So just wanted to put that out there. I'm not sure if anybody is looking to apply, but I'll put it on the chat too.
Question from Vince about pricing. So the way pricing works is that the aggregator and vendor, there's an established price that's already set for the vendor who's aggregating, distributing. So if it's a CSA style box, the vendor is expected to do the packing and the distribution and the aggregating. And that's a set box fee that we reimburse the vendor of $36. $8.50 is meant to go to the admin, any overhead costs, and $27.50 is meant to go to farms. In the procurement of farms, of the food costs, those foods prices are set by the grower. So it's sort of a combination of both. Farmer set prices, but set container price restrictions. And the other type of delivery model is bulk delivery, where a food bank just wants, cases of food. In that scenario, there's this flat rate of a 20% overhead on the food costs. So it would be if it's $100,000 contract, for example, for bulk delivery of food over a course of time, that would mean there's the expectation that $80,000 is spent with farmers, so payment to farmers for food, and $20,000 is held by the aggregating agency as their cost of doing business.
Joyce has put the website in the chat, and again, as Evelyn mentioned, we do have Spanish speakers. Again, very aware that this program, we're wanting to make this as accessible to different populations as possible. So we have Spanish speakers, and all of our materials are also in Spanish, and we're very happy to offer technical assistance and support. And Hester, to your question, so that's more for the $2 per box was more for the food bank, the food recipient, for their overhead. The $8.50 for the box is for the aggregator for their overhead. We can follow up with you in an email also and just clarify that more. But very much here for any other questions. Thank you all for your time. Again, we're really excited. If you think you're a good fit for this program, or if you know of anyone that might be a good fit, especially in the areas we're prioritizing recruitment, which is SoCal, please reach out to us. Anything else, anyone? Feel free to come off mute as well if you have questions. Great. Thank you all so much for your time. Appreciate it. Please reach out to the info@farmstogether.org email.
And the recording will be made available via CAFF.
Yeah, we appreciate all of the vendors that are being a part of this plane as well as we fly it or build it, or both.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.